I'd like to welcome each one here to our Monday, November 4th, 2024 meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order by acknowledging the land on which we gather as the traditional territory of the Nishnawbe, Ottawa, and Mississauga peoples. Confirmation of the agenda that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby approves the agenda for November 4th, 2024 council meeting as presented. May I have a mover? Councillor McBurney, Councillor Whitfield, all in favor? Carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none. Consent agenda that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent item 4.11, and further that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 4.1.2 to 4.3.6 for information purposes. May I have a mover? Councillor Van Hitterson, seconder. Councillor Whitfield. Would anybody like to pull anything from? Councillor Palmer, please.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. There's two issues I've got, and they're more of I'm hoping to get an answer, and I'd like to ask Hannah about it's about the new PPS, and there's 2 points that that seem to antagonize one another. It's 4.3.2.5, and it states a farm residence plus 2, and we all know that 2 additional dwellings. And then 4.3.3.1, it permits a lot creation for up to 1 residence surplus to the farm operation. That there's 2 there's 2 ideas going on there.
Yeah, through the Reeve. So to just answer that question, yes. So to clarify, the piece about the 2 additional residential units, that requires them to be on the same lot. They're not able to be severed separately. They would need to cluster. And then the policy below, the 4.3.3.1, discouraging lot creation except for the exemption of the 1 resident surplus to an agricultural operation. That's just speaking solely to lot creation. So that's my understanding of that is that the resident still needs to meet that criteria surplus to an agricultural operation. What I'm not entirely clear on, and I apologize for not knowing this evening, is I'm not sure how we would deal with that if they already had a resident surplus and they also had an additional residential unit. I do know the intent's not that you would sever the 1 dwelling and leave the other one separate. I will note, for example, our AG4, our smaller lots that are already in the rural areas, we do allow them to have 2 additional residential units. But just because this is newer, I don't know exactly what we would deal with in that case. But I think that's something when we come back and do an official plan amendment for North Huron to implement this after we've done the county OP, I would definitely have more clarity, but I do know the intent's not that you would sever 1 and then leave the dwelling on the retained, because the retained is prohibited from having a residence.
Okay,
so.
yeah, it's still up in the air. It's not up in the air, but it's still confusing.
Fair
really.
enough. Yep.
Yeah,
and perhaps that's something, right, when we do the implementing official plan amendment, we can make a little bit clearer because we will see more of those instances.
Good, thank you. And may I make another one? It's 4.2.4, and it's to Kelly. So it's about the registration system failure. So there's using one of the older systems, and it's up and running, and is it going tickety-boo?
Through you, Reeve Heffer, to Councillor Palmer, we are utilizing a system that has our accounting department has been using for a couple of years now. I think we're still working through some of the learnings with that system. I don't think that from a user perspective, online registration is the same as what the public has been used to. And so we're just trying to work through some of those challenges while still offering really great customer service, but also being able to account for statistics and that type of thing.
And it was suggested, or there were a couple of instances at the public meeting where people, booked the Bull Diamond and they haven't received a bill yet. So are those rectified?
Yeah, so following the town hall, I took note of that and followed up with staff who, the next afternoon provided that bill. I think that was just part of the process of, staff had to be trained on this system, in a time where we were, had a big mass registration, which is our fall time. But I believe that we are working through rectifying all of those, challenges that the public is experiencing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no one else there, so. I have mover. I have mover and second, right? All in favor? Carried. Public meetings, hearings, delegations, zone bylaw amendment, location, west half of lot 29, concession 70, Swallow Ward, Township of North Huron, 38622 Glens Hill Road. Applicant, owner Tyson Hawkins. At this time, we ask for the presentation from Planner Holman to present to us at this time.
Right. Yeah, thank you for having me, Council. Okay. So as mentioned, the subject property is located on Glens Hill Road. The following shows the subject property as per 2020 dated aerial imagery. The property is designated in zone natural environment and agriculture. And here also just shows a wider shot of the subject property in the context of the neighborhood. So it is in proximity to Donnybrook Line, as well as the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority and the Maitland River. So just to provide some background on the application. So this is for a temporary use bylaw. So the Planning Act does allow councils to pass a bylaw for a period up to 3 years for a temporary use. So this is a specific type of zoning bylaw amendment. And then upon any expiry of these temporary use bylaws, or sorry, rather, before they expire, they are eligible to be further renewed by council for a period of not more than 3 years. So there is currently a temporary use bylaw on the property that was passed 3 years prior in 2021 to permit motocross related events and races on the property for 3 years. So this has been permitted for the last 3 years. And my understanding is that there has been events that have occurred for motocross racing. The current application is a request to renew the temporary use bylaw for an additional 3 years. And then just some history. There previously was a previous temporary use bylaw for a similar use of a motocross events in 2008 and then 2011. And then after the 2011 bylaw for those 3 years, those events did cease for a number of years. The following just shows some site photos of the subject property looking north from Glens Hill Road. So the property, the proposed use for the motocross racing is proposed to occur on the agriculturally zoned portion of the property, so the south half of the property. And there's also, it is permitted that agricultural uses will still be permitted on the property. The following just shows some additional site visit photos. And then this is just looking from Donnybrook Line at the property from the side as well as the surrounding property. So I already had mentioned the request is requesting the renewal for the maximum period of 3 years. It is proposed to be used for motocross racing, motorcycle riding, and all-terrain vehicle or ATV riding as part of events. The previous bylaw was for 4 motocross events per year that were to occur over 2 days on weekends, with only one of those events being on a holiday or a long weekend. And it is the current proposal is requesting an increase from 4 events per year to 5 events. And then I mentioned before, it would occur on the southern portion of the property on an existing track, and it's approximately 25 hectares. So the proposed amendment language is included in detail in the report as well as the bylaw on the agenda, but they are required to provide notice to the township municipal office of their events at least 3 weeks prior. And then the applicant or the owner is also responsible for notifying the neighbors of the events. So that would be their responsibility to provide notice to their neighbors who have requested notice or are in proximity. I mentioned before that agricultural use is still permitted to occur on the lands. And then racing is to occur on those event dates between 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So I had mentioned before, the official plan also speaks to the permissions provided under the Planning Act that council can allow for temporary use bylaws for a period of 3 years, having consideration for any adverse impacts on surrounding area, parking, access and egress, and whether the use is temporary in nature. So any comments that were provided by the agency or the public is circulated through the Planning Act process, which I will note for council, just to clarify, is a different process than the expectation for the applicant when they host these events and notifying their neighbors of the event dates. This was circulated under the Planning Act, which is strict on the 120 meters. You have to be within the property if you're a landowner in order to get notice, or if you're a statutory agent. So Maitland Valley Conservation Authority, council will note there's 2 sets of comments from MVCA in the package. We did circulate them as their regulation staff. Under their regulations, they provided no concerns with the subject property because a portion of the property is regulated under their regulations. And then they provided some general information on source water and wetlands for information. The township drainage superintendent also has no concerns. And then also township staff were involved in discussing this application and report in detail. Currently 3 written public comments have been received, and no additional written comments have been received since the agenda was published. One of them was from an owner of an abutting property that indicated that they have no concern but wish to be notified of events. There was a comment received from another neighbor that they were concerned with music or noise, particularly early in the morning, and concerned with no longer receiving notice of the events. There was also a similar complaint that was anonymously received through the township's separate complaints process due to an event in late September, and they had concerns with noise and music. So that has also been noted, even though that wasn't formally received through the planning process. So with respect to these comments, township staff and myself have been in discussion with the applicant of relaying these comments and emphasizing the importance of providing notice of event dates. And in particular, some of the concern I think was from also the rescheduling of events, and in particular with late September of this year, I think it was a rescheduled event. So we have proposed, in my recommendation, it's just proposing that the bylaw be revised to also clarify that any event rescheduling also need to be subject to providing notice 3 weeks in advance. And then concern with music and general noise, the bylaw is recommended to be revised to also clarify that not only shall racing only occur in the hours of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., but any associated event activities such as playing music. Just continuing with the public comments. So MVCA also provided comments as a neighboring landowner, so separate from their regulations role. So this is considered a public comment. The MVCA, this is an excerpt from their correspondence. They do own properties to the east of the subject property. And in particular, just at the end of Glens Hill Road, they do own and operate a seasonal campground facility. Their comments, as originally received, are included in the agenda, but to paraphrase, they have concern with the increased number of events, size, and particularly with them occurring on long weekends. They also have concern with training and using the facilities outside of event times. They also had concern with event attendees entering the MVCA property on motor vehicles. As I understand from their correspondence, they prohibit motorized vehicles on their properties. And then they just had a question raised about overnight camping and whether this has been permitted, with concern about sewage and water services. So to clarify, the overnight accommodation or camping is not amongst the permitted uses in the temporary use bylaw or the underlying AG1 general agricultural applicable zoning. Overnight accommodation was also not contemplated in the original temporary use bylaw. And as mentioned, the landowner has also been shared this comment and then is suggested that they also shall include MVCA in their notification of event dates. So that's just a summary of their comments, which I've already went over. So in terms of the revisions, just those aforementioned items that we had mentioned previously. So notification of event rescheduling and clarifying that the associated event activities shall also occur 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. The revised bylaw text is included in the next slide, but it was also included in the report or agenda. So again, just speaking to also any associated event activities, including but not limited to tear down and setup occurring during those hours, and then also accounting for rescheduling of events. And then the rest of the bylaw is what was originally approved for in 2021 is being requested again with the exemption of increasing the event dates from 4 to 5 per year. So it is recommended that the application be approved for that period of 3 years, subject to those aforementioned recommended revisions with respect to event activities and requiring notice for rescheduled events. Just a reminder to council that a further motion to the effect of public and agency comments is required. So because there are recommended revisions by staff with respect to the bylaw as it was originally circulated, under the Planning Act, if council feels that these changes are minor in nature, in that they don't need to give full additional notice, so that full additional notice would be to all the landowners in 120 meters and all the statutory agencies that received the original notice. If they are agreeable that the changes are minor in nature and the full notice is not required, they can make a motion to that effect. And I will note that anyone who has submitted written comments or submits verbal comments will still continue to receive the notice regardless. But this is something that's quite common for council to consider if there have been revisions to the bylaw after it's been circulated as recommended. If council wishes to approve the bylaw as originally proposed, then the additional motion is not required. And then if council wishes to have any other further revisions other than what staff have recommended and what's been included in the council agenda, then they could also consider that motion if they're of the opinion that the changes are minor. So this is just that motion to that effect. Just speaking to council has held a public meeting under the Planning Act with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw. Certain changes have been made to the proposed bylaw after holding of the public meeting, and therefore council makes a resolution under the Planning Act that the changes were of such nature that no further notice is to be given with respect to the proposed bylaw prior to its passing. So that's just to clarify that technical motion. And then we can return to this after council has provided direction, and I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have. And then I will also note that the applicant is in attendance.
Okay, thank you very much, Planner Holman. So at this time, we'll go to 5.1.2 and an opportunity to comment on the application by applicant or agent. Ask Tyson to come up then.
Hello, I'm Tyson Hawkins, the owner of the property. We're just asking for a 3-year basically extension on this so we can continue the events to happen at the property on Glens Hill Road. We think it's very good for the community. It brings people from all over Ontario and the States and Quebec all over the place to this area, and they spend money and ride this track. It's actually known as one of the best tracks in Canada, so a lot of people actually enjoy this track and love coming to it. So we're just trying to extend it for another 3 years, basically.
Okay, thank you very much, Tyson. This time there's opportunity to comment by others in attendance. Seeing none. Opportunity for questions, comments from council members at this time, 5.1.4. Deputy Reid, please.
Thank you. Through you, Reeve, this would be to Hannah. The temporary land use, section 39, this has come to us 3 or 4 times through my time in council. What are the provisions to go past that temporary and having it a permanent designation? What is my one question. And my second question is are we proposing restrictions on one landowner that's not on an adjacent landowner? I mean, there's a campground just at the end of the road there. Are they subject to the same 8 AM until 8 o'clock at night, terms for noise and music and such? I just don't want to, pen one property with something that the other property or adjacent does not have to apply to. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Through the Reeve. So your first question on what it would take for them to get out of the temporary use bylaw, there is an option to apply for, I guess I would say, permanent zoning on the property. What we've seen, I guess, in other places, the other example I can think of is Walton also has a similar facility. They have the property zoned some sort of recreation zoning, so that could be an option. It would just be a higher planning test in that case. If it were to be a permanent use, they would need to also do an official plan amendment as well as a zoning bylaw amendment. And staff would have to evaluate what types of studies would we need at that point to be satisfied that this is something that can manage more regular events. I think that's what the challenge is. I guess I would say the one benefit of the temporary use bylaw is that it's something that incentivizes, I would say, good behavior, and that they have to come back every 3 years. The challenge is more with the permanent zoning. Is the question would be, I guess I would just say if you have a few events every year, that's a lot clearer that that's something that's temporary, versus something if you were to permanently rezone it. I would say there would be a lot more challenges in terms of regulating the number of events that were for every year. So as staff, we would probably have to look at it that it would be something that would be more frequently used if it were to have that general zoning that says, yep, you can operate a motocross racing. So that's what it would take for them, is it would just be a little bit more involved in a higher planning test.
Yeah, to the Reeve there, I would just, I wouldn't want restrictions on a motocross track in our municipality, not being able to compete with a neighboring municipality for events and such. That was the only reason why I was putting that forward. But, and as to the requirements, okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And I also will just add to that previous comment. Obviously, I don't know the specifics of the other racetrack, but I mean, for example, things like permanent servicing, would they get to a point where if it's more frequent, they would have to put an actual bathroom and appropriate sewage facilities? That's, for example, something we would look at in a more rigorous planning application. And then just the comment on restrictions on others in terms of noise. I'm would also look at township staff that could more accurately look at their general bylaws with respect to noise. But my understanding is that if someone's having an event on their property on occasion, I don't believe that there is bylaws that state that you can only make noise of certain hours, but that would be something I think with this application, we did recognize that this event is a little bit larger in scale than we otherwise typically see in terms of how many people are there, as well as the impact for noise. And that's why we felt it was appropriate that they go through the temporary use bylaw, and that perhaps additional restrictions in this case are appropriate. But again, I'm not intimately familiar with all of the township bylaws.
Follow up, Deputy?
Yes, through Reeve, just wanted a clarification that the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority wasn't a large enough organization with owning the property at the end of the street that they were making their own bylaws as to how things were happening on theirs. That was different from the townships.
Yeah, through the Reeve, I'm not aware if the MVCA regulates for their own visitors. Unfortunately, I'm not aware.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Palmer now at this time.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Yeah, I want to commend Mr. Hawkins for developing or building a Class A track. That's good. Just a question about how many folks would be there on a typical weekend?
It's 1,500 on a big weekend, which is the first one in May. That's around 2,500 people. On a weekend.
Okay.
So it's quite large.
Okay, may I carry on? the concerns of the Maitland Valley about folks just getting onto their property, that's serious to me. I know a sign means diddly, really. Because in their other properties, they're having trouble keeping people out as well. So is there anything that can be done, like more barriers or something? Because, you know, the temptation is there. I used to ride a bike and I went places I shouldn't have. And I was a kid, not as an adult. And so I think that's something that we need to address. And sewage, what do you do now, if anything?
So everybody takes their campers home, like, they just take it to the back of their town or dump it at their house or the local campground or whatever it is. But no one dumps on site, it all goes back. And I had some porta potties on site. That's, yeah,
Okay,
but for the trailers, it's everyone takes it.
everyone to themselves,
Yeah.
okay. I don't know if that's something that's, like on a long weekend, you can fill those tanks up pretty quick, you would think. But anyways, it's something to, I won't say any more. I've got other ideas about that one, but it could be a concern in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Henderson.
Yes,
please.
thank you, Reeve. One of the concerns I have is the notification of the neighboring properties, because the 120 meters is nothing. The Auburn Hills is on a hill, and the noise carries very, very far away. And if you're like 2 kilometers away, it is if it's very close in your backyard. So I would like a wider area that you send out your notifications. And yeah, and also if you change dates for the races and that people will be notified. That would help a lot of grievance from the neighbors already.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions from members? Seeing none, we'll go to 5.1.5. This is a public meeting of the Council of the Township of North Huron. Thus, the decision of council may or may not be made this evening on the zoning bylaw amendment. If the bylaw is passed by council, the clerk is required to send notice passing to the bylaw to persons or public bodies that have made written requests to be notified of the decision. There is a 20-day objection period from the time of the notice of passing of the bylaw has been mailed by first-class post, wherein submissions, letters of objection or support in respect to the passing of bylaw will be received by the clerk. If an objection is received, an appeal is lodged with the Ontario Land Tribunal, and at that point, the township no longer has any control over the time factor involved. If council does not pass the bylaw, the applicant may appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If the bylaw is passed and no objections are received within the objection period, the clerk certifies that the bylaw is in force and of effect as of the date of its passing, and notices forward to the Huron County Planning Development Department. 5.1.6, summary of the comments. Planner Holman, go ahead, please.
So if council wishes to approve the amendment as presented, it is recommended that they select option A7, that public comments were received on the issues of noise, the lack of notice by the owner of event dates, disruption to neighboring campground properties and overnight camping. Comments were thoroughly considered by the comments related to noise, notice, and overnight camping. These were addressed through a change to the bylaw text and by clarifying existing permitted uses. And that option A3 be selected, that agency comments were received in support of the application, the effect of which resulted in a decision to approve the application.
Sorry, was that B3, did I hear you say?
Yes, that is correct, B3.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Planner Holman. At this time, 5.17, decision of council and the effect of the comments received on council's decision Motion one, that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby approves the zoning bylaw amendment file Z04-2024 as it applies to the west half of Lot 29, Concession 7, East Wallenosh Ward, Township of North Huron, 38622 Hill Road, subject to the recommended revisions to add provisions clarifying the associated event activities shall also occur between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. and to require notice to be provided for rescheduled event dates. May I have a mover? Deputy Reeve, Councillor Palmer, all in favor? Carried. The zoning of bylaw amendment file Z04-2024 as it applies to the west half of Lot 29, Concession 7, East Wallenosh Ward, Township of North Huron, 38622 Glens Hill Road. We'll go with A7 and B3. May I have a mover? Councillor McBurney, seconder. Councillor Whitfield, all in favor? Carried. Whereas the Council of the Township of North Huron has held a public meeting pursuant to Section 3412 of the Planning Act with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. And whereas certain changes have been made to the proposed bylaw after the holding of the public meeting, now, therefore, the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby resolves that the pursuant to Section 3417 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 CP 13, the changes were of such a nature that no further notice is to be given in respect of the proposed bylaw prior to its passing. May I have a mover? Councillor Whitfield, seconder. Councillor McBurney, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, Hannah. At this time, we go to 5.2, Paul Seaback and Company, presentation of the 2023 audited financial statements. At this time, we welcome Paul to the podium.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. Nice to be here. Very nice council chambers. Congratulations on that. Our report is for the 2023 December 31st financial statements. There's two parts. As in previous years, there's the full consolidated financial statements, and then we've tried to provide a little more condensed information in a 2-page report. Just talk about the audit. We're contracted as your auditors, and at the end of the audit, we've issued a clean and unqualified auditor's report. It states that in our opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial performance and its cash flows for the year ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So basically a clean audit. After our audit, we did not find any unusual transactions such as journal entries, purchases, or significant matters that we would bring to council's attention. There was no outstanding issues at the end of the audit, and during the audit, we received complete cooperation from the finance department and any other department we go to pretty well almost every department, asking questions, etc., and everything we asked was provided for. Going through the financial statements, the first thing you notice, there's a surplus $8.7 million, which is, quite high. The big reason for that is we're required by the province to prepare statements a little different than you would create your budget. Your budget is more on a cash basis, where ours is more accrual accounting, for lack of a better word. The big difference is you expense your capital and we depreciate it. We don't take reserves coming and going as income or expenses. We just allocate it as surplus. We still show reserves. And there's certain things like principal payments on debt you expense because you have to raise money to pay your principal and interest. We just expense interest. Obviously, a big part of the surplus this year, and we looked at financial statements, is the $4.2 million sale of the airport. So that's part of the 8.7. You spent $2.1 million on capital. You had budgeted 8.1. Quite a few projects not completed. One was the House and Dam. One was the Wingham Water Tower. There's some renovation work at the West Cast Community Center and some water and sewer projects. So what that does later on, we look at your balance sheet, that just shows instead of spending that money and you've got more cash in the bank and you've also got higher reserves. Speaking of reserves, they increased by 8 million to 27.4 million dollars. Some were planned, some were not. Some were because the projects were not completed yet. Planned to add $4 million reserves if you had done all your capital projects. You also did not spend all your federal gas tax grant. So at the end of the year, you had 829,000 of that sitting in deferred revenue. I always like to mention that even though you have the $27 million of reserves that we've spoken on, 12.3 million of that is designated for water and sewer. A really positive item is your debt is down to 230,000. It was 315, so you made regular payments. There was no new debt taken on this year, so you know, a couple years, you know, you could soon be debt free, which is really positive. One thing that was significant to this year was there's a new accounting policy called asset retirement obligation. And it's quite similar to an old policy called landfill closure and post-closure costs. You're trying to figure out how much money you need today to pay for landfill closure costs. And so we were required to apply that policy to 2022 and 23. So that's why we've restated 2022. You know, it's not that something came up that we changed 2022. We just applied a policy kind of backwards. The first page is the financial report to council, financial indicators. So as I said, you didn't do all your capital, so you'll see higher cash, higher reserves. So your bank balance at the end of December was $30.8 million, up quite a bit from 21.7, 20,200,000 in general, 4.8 million water, 5.5 in sewer. Everything else there is long-term receivables are nil this year. Those are tile drain loans that have been loaned out and paid, so you don't have any of those anymore. And your long-term investment is your share of the original cost of West Ontario. You'd see that number hasn't changed, so we're not valuing that at fair market value or anything. That's just the value when that deal occurred many years ago. So total assets, $34.5 million, up roughly 9.5 million from the year before. Things you owed at the end of the year, accounts payable, roughly the same. Deferred revenue, as I said, 800,000 of that is federal gas tax. The rest are development charges. Your municipal debt we've spoken on is down from 323 to 230,000. Then we have this asset retirement obligation. You can see last year under the old formula, and we were working off old reports from your engineer, was 367. Now it's 4.3 million. Part of that is the new regulation. You're supposed to, before you only talked about how much it would cost to close the existing part of the landfill that was open. Now the engineer has to look at the whole landfill site as if it's full and how much it will cost to close that. And also you got some new updated reports. I guess, you know, that's an important number. You know, the ministry makes us put that there. And I think it's to let you know that there is a future obligation, which close your landfill site. In reality, that money will be used from either reserves you've set up or current year expenditures when you actually do close the landfill site. And that number is broken down between the Wingham, East Wildman, and your share of the Blythe Hulett. Most of that, 3.9 of that is with Wingham. So your net financial assets are up quite a bit from 20.7 million to 26.1. It would be up even more if we had applied when you look at, we didn't restate this schedule, but it'd be up even more. So you're in a stronger financial position, obviously, because you have that much more money in the bank. Tangible capital assets, those are roads, buildings, machinery, etc. And we've shown that there's 2.1 added to it. So then your total surplus is 78.1 million, up 8 million from the prior year. The next page is basically your income statement, shown over 5 years, including the budget. So you see your taxation quite close to budget. Your UMF grant, you know, had been going down. It's kind of stabilized. Hopefully that can stay that way. The Ontario Community Infrastructure Improvement Grant, that's a capital grant. You'll notice county feed subsidies, that's mostly daycare. That's up just the way the funding, the new agreements with daycares have went $1.4 million. User fees, recreation, you can tell it's slowly come back from COVID. You know, in 2020, 263, now it's up to 831. Childcare is a little down because now they're more subsidized, so the actual cost of the parents is lower. Other fees and charges, the 790, that includes the money received in regards to the Hutton Heights, 650,000. Because you had more money in the bank and interest rates are higher, you received a lot more interest. That added to your surplus. You can see you budgeted 440, you took in 1.4. Obviously, interest rates have gone down a bit recently, so you may not be able to count on that. And then the gain and loss disposition of capital assets, that's most of that is driving is the 4.2 million. There are some other, sometimes you get rid of something that has a cost, you just have a loss on it because it was time to get rid of it, a road or something, a sewer line, etc. So total revenue, $22.6 million. The expenses are pretty close to budget. So if you look on a cash basis, if you took the 22.6 income and subtract the 21 million, not including capital and reserve transfers, you know, your gain is not 8 million. It's you know, closer to 900,000. But then when we have to reverse the capital, reverse the transfers to reserves, depreciate the assets, the change in landfill liability, it reduces your expenses to 13.9, and that creates $8.7 million surplus. So I'm just trying to not to dwell on the 8.7 to, you know, that's your surplus reported to the ministry. It's important because these statements on the FIR, you know, how they see but on a cash basis, you know, compared to your budget, that was not, you know, a different surplus. As far as the financial statements, there is a new, just for information purposes, there is a new page called Management Responsibility for the financial statements. That's something we're required to enter now. The accounting, auditing boards are really big on independence. So this just states and signed by management that they prepare the financial statements and we audit it. We're independent and we're not auditing our own work. On page 4 of the notes, there's quite a bit to do with the change in accounting policy with this new asset retirement obligation instead of the landfill closure. It talks about the changes. There's actually quite a bit of work to amend the prior years, but it doesn't really make a huge effect expense-wise because it 107,000 to the prior year 2022. Page 6, it's just it's to verify your municipal debt. That is 230,000 and the last payment is March 2026. The new note for asset retirement obligation is note number 10. It just states kind of the theory behind it and the process. Some of the discount factors that your engineer would have used all those. And then the last page on the full financial statements, I would talk about reserves and transfers. It shows 19.4 was your opening. You added 8,065,000. Now your reserves are 27.4 million. And under deferred revenue, it shows that you didn't spend all your federal gas tax funds. So you have 829,000, which you probably would have used in 2024. There are other statements we prepare for the BIAs. I don't know if you want to go through those or.
Sorry, just highlight them
Okay,
maybe
sure.
for us.
Yeah. The Blythe BIA, they had kind of it's easy for me to say, kind of a quiet year. They ended up with, they had a surplus of $7,684. They didn't do all the work they wanted to do. I know they want to do more in 2024 with banners, etc. So they ended up with $20,000 in the bank, $20,500. When you look at their expenses, basically the levy is 10,822. They get donations and some small other revenue, $186. The expenses were basically almost all either for advertising and promotion events, plus the internet, the website they keep, and some bank charges. So Wingham had a busier year. They actually ended up with a deficit for the year. You can see they had $5,200 in the bank. They also had short-term deposits, a 30-day deposit that matured January 7th, 2024, $51,089. Accounts receivable, $3,400 were members owing for specific Christmas promotions. Things they owed at the end of the year, 11,000. That was for mostly Christmas advertising for that program. As far as their expenses, their levy is 26,000. It's a little lower than last year. Membership fees, $150 each. Certain people who are outside of the BIA pay for those. Some other, the promotions are mostly the Christmas promotion, $8,488. So total revenue, $39,000. And they had some big campaigns as far as promotions. Most of their advertising is radio, newspaper, the LED sign, etc. And Main Street improvements, they did work for benches, speakers, and some new Christmas lights, $32,000. So that $32,000 is what created a deficit of $6,000, but they had reserves they transferred to bring that to zero. A lot of information kind of crammed in there, but you know, at the end of the year, you're in a stronger position financially with your bank and your reserves. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. Okay, at this time, any counselors with some questions? This time, you ran the numbers through us very, very quickly there, and you know, we've looked at them, and yeah. Go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
I hope it wasn't mentioned earlier, but yeah, thank you, Rick. About the childcare, like it's a deficit. So is there receivables coming? Like the new system is quite like this. Well, I don't know if they're at the $10 deal yet, but we're not really receiving the money as quick as it would be. It's delayed, right, by a few months, if not more. Daycare has always been, childcare has always been a little bit positive for us through the years. And I didn't see it here. I saw a deficit.
Yeah, you'd have to look at your specific, I think Chris could probably provide, can't speak for him, but you could probably provide a specific statement for the daycare.
Through you, Reeve, to Councillor Palmer, I can gather some information with Director Stice. Some of the programs are 100% cost recovery, but not all. Right, so we discuss when we have this conversation that it's on a cost recovery basis. Like a lot of our users fees, we try to get there. There's a lot of different supports from the provincial government, and which comes down from the county. So there are efforts to get all of our daycare facility and programs up to cost recovery, but not all of them actually are at full cost recovery.
They used to be.
I can't speak to what happened within the daycare system over the last number of years, but I do know that there are constant ongoing changes, and the province is working to better that, to put it at a full cost recovery. But Director Stice can probably speak better to that than myself.
For you, Reeve Heffer, to Councillor Palmer, I think it would be probably helpful to bring more details back. I don't want to speak off the cuff. I know that there are changes provincially. They are recently made an announcement in terms of their funding model, and we're just trying to realize some of that. But we can certainly bring that back.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone? Seeing none, well, appreciate you coming up tonight, Paul, and appreciate the report you gave us.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a good night.
Okay, very much. Right here. Staff reports. 6.2.1. Finance 2024-24-2023 audited financial statements. Are there any questions for Director Towns? Seeing none? Okay. At this time, I'd like to have a mover. Counselor Van Henderson, seconder. Deputy Reeve, all in favor? Carried. Correspondence requiring action or direction. Wingham BIA letter ratification of board appointees and resignations that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby approves a new appointment to the and the resignation from a Wingham Business Improvement Area BIA Board for the remainder of the 2022 to 2026 term of council, as per the letter from Chair Tiffin dated October 18th, 2024. And further, that the council adopt bylaw number 81-2024, being the appointment of members to boards and committees bylaw at the November 4th, 2024 regular meeting. May I have a mover? Councillor McBurney, seconder. Councillor Van Henderson, all in favor? Carried. Okay, we'll move on to next, Reeves activity report. Fairly quiet couple weeks. I just want to take this time, our Public Works Director isn't here yet, but I just want to take this time to thank him for putting the Legion banners up, both in Wingham and in Blythe. To me, it's really a good thing. We're honoring those people that gave us this great country to live in. Then on last week, I was at a Sepoy open house there, and Rod just thanks for able to work with Public Works and sewer for being able to hook up to them, and they had a real good rapport, he said. So I just want to bring that back to council. Then, is there any comments from council member or board or committee? Anybody? Go ahead, Councillor Whitfield.
There we go. Sustainable Huron committee that Paul and I went to there on Friday, aging in their rural committees. Like it's this Dr. Alexandra Peel was there, and she was telling us all about there's a lot of people moving to the rural areas for retirement, get away from the cities and everything, but there's no doctors. So they go back to the cities for their doctors and everything. There was a lot of information passed around. What they're saying, what we have to do for these people, for this aging community that we have, all the planning, welcoming committees and welcoming areas for these people, healthcare availability. And as I said when I was there, like over the past few years, I've had a run through the aging parents, and there's a lot of available things for these people, but there is no money. As they say, they're working on getting the money, but they had a lot of great ideas on how to entertain these people, how to house these people, the whole bit, but there was no money for all this. So they are working on trying to get more money for this kind of stuff. Like they figure by 2030, we'd have 25% in rural communities of people over 65, which we need the daycare or centers for these aging people and everything, which we don't have. We need land for them to build these sites on. We need daycare staff to run these houses for these people. There was a lot of different ideas tossed around. They had a 55 plus little communities that they put together, where the people had their rooms and interacted in their communal kitchens and living rooms and stuff. They had those people, and they just kind of stayed together until they moved to the aging homes, which was a little different idea too. It was just a different way of planning for the aging people. But like, as I said, like we listened to 2 or 3 of them, and they all had the same ideas about entertaining these people, housing the people, but the money was a big thing. Aging at home is what they would really like to see. So like I mentioned there that this aging at home, if you don't have the people to do it, there's gonna have to be money for the people that are looking after them, the families that are looking after them, that can't go out to work when they're looking after their aging parents. It was a very good seminar. Like, it went on for hours and hours. Like, I really enjoyed it. There was a lot of information given. But going through what I have in the last few years with the aging parents, we do need to lobby the governments for more and more money to accommodate this situation that's happening in the rural townships. Thank you.
Thanks, Counselor Whitfield. Yeah, one thing took away from it, when we're working with the SALC, thing that, our, Director Stice is working with, it hits home that it'd be really well to be able to have that right down number 4, Wingham, Belgrave, Blythe, where there's enough people that are going to make use of it. So if we can get that passed, it'd be wonderful. Does anybody else have any comments? Okay, comments by members, go ahead. Yes, go ahead, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be really nice. This is about the public meeting we had. I just wanted to say that a lot of the questions were not directed to us. They were directed to staff. So I'm just wondering, is there another way of having a meeting where questions can be answered properly? So I'd like you to just think about that one. Now I understand there were folks that maybe were intimidated and wanted to ask questions, and others, they just couldn't. So I don't know how we can accommodate them, but we missed out on hearing maybe some really good comments. But there were some brave souls that offered comments. So is there, I'm just wondering where we're at, because they want to know. They asked the questions, and some of them were good ones, and something that we could do something about. Kelly, you did mention that you've made headway on the billing, because that was a few questions about that. So that's good. And then these other ones, there was one about the, well, I don't have them written down, but the snow plow, the one that plows the sidewalks, it was too wide, taking out grass. A lot of folks had concerns about that. But anyways, you all took notes, and I'm just wondering where we're at, because they want to know.
Thank you. Would you like to reply at all?
Yeah, thanks, your worship. So in terms of the format, that's certainly something that we're looking at and we're discussing in terms of for next year, perhaps a different format to provide the opportunity to receive it perhaps in a different form in terms of more one-on-one interactions. So that's something that we're looking at for next year. And in terms of the other comments that the public made in terms of opportunities for improvement, we're certainly at a staff level. We've been discussing those, identifying those. And as you've noted, for example, Director Stice, took note of that and has been working that through. So there's certainly work being done in the background. Staff certainly was there, staff listened, and certainly are undertaking what we can do to improve the service. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, 8.4, any notice of motions? Seeing none. Bylaw number 81, 2024, appointment to boards and committees bylaw. May I have a mover? Deputy Reeve, seconder, Councillor Palmer, all in favor? Carried. 9.2 bylaw 82, 24, zoning bylaw amendment. Hawkins, may I have a mover? Councillor McBurney, Councillor Palmer, all in favor? Carried. Next meetings and announcements. The next regular council meeting will be held on Monday, November 18th, 2024 at 6 p.m. in the North Huron Council Chambers. Next Wingham BIA board meeting will be held on Thursday, November 21, 2024 at 6:30 at Hot Stove Lounge. at the West Cass Community Complex. The next Blythe BI Board meeting will be held on Thursday, November 28th, 24 at 8 a.m. in the first floor meeting room at the Blythe and District Community Centers. Are there any other announcements? Seeing none. At this time, we'll go to 12, closed session reporting out. The Council of Township of North Huron hereby proceeds at 7 o'clock to an in-camera session closed to the public under section 239(2)(k) of the Municipal Act to discuss the following: a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to the negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board, and it's concerning concession booth lease or agreement negotiations, and a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board, the Belgrave Water Cross-Border Servicing Agreement negotiations. And further, that the CAO remains for item 1 and 2, the Director of Legislative Services Clerk, item 1 and 2, and the Director of Recreation and Child Services, item 1, remain in attendance. May I have a mover? Councillor Van Hitterson, Councillor Whitfield, all in favor? Carried. At this time, we'll take a